The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the meeting room, illuminating the cold and austere atmosphere of the company. Emma stood at the head of the executive table, her gaze firm and determined as she prepared to present her new advertising campaign. She was a brilliant marketing executive, known for her creativity and ability to turn ideas into results. However, this meeting promised to be a real challenge. The faces around the table were serious, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Good morning, everyone," Emma began, her voice echoing in the room. "Today, I'm excited to present our new campaign for the launch of Product X. I believe we have a unique opportunity to stand out in the market and win new customers." As she proceeded with her presentation, a keen gaze focused on her. Daniel, her longtime rival, was sitting to her right. He was equally ambitious and known for his sharp criticism. "If I may interrupt, Emma," Daniel said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This idea seems a bit risky, doesn't it? We're talking about a product that needs a solid strategy to stand out, not just a mere attempt to grab attention." The provocation in his words was evident, and Emma felt a chill in her stomach, a mix of anger and challenge. "Daniel, if you had paid attention to my market research, you would know that innovation is what consumers want now," Emma replied, maintaining her composure. "We need to move away from the conventional. I believe this campaign can put us ahead of the competition." She continued, her passion for the idea shining through every word, but Daniel didn't seem convinced. "Delivering the message creatively is important, but you're underestimating our audience's intelligence. They won't just buy a product because of a flashy video," Daniel insisted, his tone firm, as if he were leading a debate and not just expressing his opinion. The discussion continued, with Emma defending her vision and Daniel countering every argument. The other executives watched, some clearly entertained by the verbal battle, while others seemed uncomfortable. Emma was determined to show that her idea was viable, but Daniel's presence, always ready to criticize, made her heart race in a way she couldn't ignore. After the meeting, Emma left the room with her head held high, but frustration followed her. Where could she go now? She needed a place to process everything she had just heard and felt. That's when she decided to take refuge in a nearby bar, a place where she could relax and leave the day's tensions behind. The bar had a cozy atmosphere, with low lights and soft music playing in the background. Emma ordered a drink and settled at an isolated table, trying to distance herself from work stress. However, to her surprise, Daniel entered shortly after, looking as determined as he had been in the meeting. "What a coincidence, isn't it?" he declared, approaching the table. Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't help feeling a chill in her stomach. "Coincidence? Or did you follow me here?" she joked, trying to keep the conversation light despite the irritation she felt. "I'm not that obsessive, Emma," he replied with an ironic smile. "I'm just looking for a place to relax after your presentation, which, by the way, was quite interesting." "Interesting is a kind word for what you really think," she shot back, her eyes fixed on his. "But I don't expect you to understand. It's always been like this between us, right? Constant rivalry." "That's true," Daniel agreed, leaning forward as if he wanted to get closer to the conversation. "But sometimes that rivalry hides something more, don't you think?" His tone was softer, and Emma felt a chill down her spine. A spark of attraction, something both tried to ignore, lingered in the air. "I'm not interested in discussing that," Emma replied, trying to keep her guard up. "We have work to do, and that involves much more than feelings." The conversation flowed between provocations and nervous laughter. Deep down, both knew that the tension between them was more complex than mere professional rivalry. But at that moment, Emma made a conscious effort to push those thoughts away. After all, what was at stake was much more important than personal feelings. As Daniel walked away, Emma realized that the day was far from over, and that the rivalry that had always defined their interactions was now about to transform into something entirely different. That night, as she looked out the bar window, the city lights reflected in her eyes, and she wondered what the future held for them. Emma was in her office, the sunlight filtering through the large windows as she reviewed documents, but her mind was elsewhere. What should have been a productive day quickly turned into a nightmare. The news that the account she had worked tirelessly on was now in Daniel's hands, left her furious. It was an account that could be a game changer for her company, and the idea that he had stolen it only fueled her anger. She got up abruptly, her leather chair creaking under the pressure of her movement. "How dare he do this?" she muttered to herself, slamming her hand on the desk in frustration. Her coworkers watched with a mix of concern and curiosity, but Emma didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that she needed revenge. "I'll show him that he can't just walk over me," she thought, determined. However, her mind was agitated by more than just anger. There was a part of her that felt attracted to Daniel, and this confused her even more. "It's just competition," she repeated, trying to convince herself. But even so, the memory of his piercing gaze and challenging smiles made her feel a chill in her stomach. That night, as she walked through the illuminated city, Emma couldn't stop thinking about how she could turn the situation around. "If he thinks he's going to get away with this, he's very mistaken," she murmured through clenched teeth, deciding that she needed to find a way to destabilize him. She had heard rumors about a flaw in his latest campaign, something that could be exploited to discredit him. "If I can do that, I can win the account back," she thought, a malicious smile forming on her face. Meanwhile, Daniel was in his own office, surrounded by charts and presentations. The feeling of victory still enveloped him, but there was a growing discomfort in his chest. He knew that Emma wouldn't stand still, and the determination she displayed was something that always intrigued him. "She won't give up easily," he told himself, thinking about how he could protect himself from her fury. The idea of investigating Emma's weaknesses came to his mind as a survival instinct. "If she wants to play dirty, I'll play dirty too," he decided, already starting to review the marketing materials she had presented. There was something wrong with her campaign, and if I can find out what it is, I can use it to my advantage. The next morning, Emma entered the meeting room with an air of confidence, disguising her anxiety. The crucial presentation was approaching, and both rivals were preparing for a direct confrontation. She sat in one of the chairs, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. "This is my chance to shine," she thought, trying to ignore the feeling that Daniel was always lurking, ready to attack her when she least expected it. Meanwhile, Daniel, in his own meeting, was aware of the tension in the air. He couldn't help but look at Emma, observing her as she passionately spoke about her ideas. "She's good, very good," he admitted, despite their rivalry. But even so, the certainty that he had an advantage motivated him to continue the fight. "I'll show her that I'm not just a rival, but a true adversary," he thought, his gaze becoming firmer. The day of the presentation arrived, and Emma was ready to face Daniel. She wore a dress that made her feel powerful, a shade of red that reflected her determination. When she entered the conference room, the tension between them was palpable. "This is my moment," she thought, looking into Daniel's eyes, who watched her with a mixture of respect and challenge. "Emma," he began, with that tone of voice she knew so well. "Do you really think you can win this?" The provocation was there, and Emma felt her blood boil. "Not just win, Daniel, I'll dominate," she replied without averting her gaze. Both knew that the battle was just beginning, and as the presentation unfolded, the rivalry between them became increasingly intense, fueled not only by competition, but also by an attraction they couldn't ignore. The auditorium was packed, and a palpable tension hung in the air. Emma, with her determined demeanor, looked at the audience, facing the crowd of investors and executives eagerly awaiting her presentation. She had worked tirelessly on the new proposal, and the twist she was about to present was the key piece that could change the course of the dispute against Daniel. Beside her, Daniel, impeccably dressed, watched her with a look that mixed admiration and concern. He knew that if Emma managed to impress as she intended, the game could turn in her favor. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the pleasure of presenting to you an innovative strategy that will not only expand our market reach, but also solidify our position as industry leaders, Emma began, her firm voice echoing through the auditorium. She glided through the images of her presentation, each slide carefully crafted to capture the audience's attention and interest. Daniel, though a rival, couldn't help but feel impressed. The way she articulated her ideas, the passion in her voice, was contagious. However, as Emma spoke, Daniel felt a twinge of anxiety. "And here is the element that will make all the difference," Emma continued, revealing a chart that showed exponential growth with the new strategy. "By integrating cutting-edge technology and a renewed focus on customer service, we are ready to transform the consumer experience and exceed our sales expectations." When the presentation ended, the audience was silent for a moment that seemed like an eternity. Then, a round of applause erupted, and Emma smiled, knowing she had captured the audience's attention. Daniel, on the other hand, was in an internal war. He recognized Emma's brilliance, but also felt the pressure of being outdone. After the presentation, the two met at an industry event. The atmosphere was filled with soft music and lively conversations, but the tension between them was undeniable. Emma, still radiant after the presentation, walked around the hall, but her heart was racing, not just from her success, but from Daniel's presence. He was there, in a corner, watching her, and she couldn't ignore the attraction that emanated from him. "You really nailed it up there," Daniel said, approaching, his tone mixed with sincerity and a touch of competitiveness. "I didn't expect a twist like that." "Thank you, Daniel, but you know I won't make it easy." "The competition has only just begun," Emma replied, a provocative smile on her lips. "I'd never expect anything less from you," he laughed, but the tension between them was almost palpable. "You've always been a worthy opponent, and honestly, I like the challenge." As they talked, the chemistry between them became evident. The closeness enveloped them in an almost electric aura, and for a brief moment, the smiles and provocations turned into meaningful glances. Emma felt her heart race, and Daniel, on the other hand, was wondering if there was something more between them than just professional rivalry. "We need to keep our distance, you know," Emma said, breaking the silence that had formed, trying to regain the reason that was slipping away. "This is just a business game." "Yes, of course. A game," Daniel replied, but his voice carried a tone of doubt. He moved a little closer, and Emma felt the warmth of his body. The tension was almost unbearable, and she knew that if she didn't step back, she might end up giving in to something that was forming between them. "Look, Daniel, we need to focus on work. That's all that matters now," Emma said, trying to ignore the current of emotions surrounding her. But deep down, she knew that the line between love and hate was thinner than she ever imagined. That night, when she returned home, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Her mind was in turmoil, filled with memories of the conversation, the looks, the magnetism that seemed to pull them toward each other. It was an internal battle, and she wondered if she could focus on her career without being swept away by this new and unfamiliar feeling that challenged everything she believed about her ambitions. The lights of Chicago flickered through the windows of Daniel's luxurious apartment as he sat in a leather armchair, surrounded by papers and reports. The weight of the world seemed to press on his shoulders. He couldn't stop thinking about Emma. The rivalry that once motivated him now became a maze of confused emotions. "What am I doing? What's happening to me?" He murmured to himself, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. He remembered the way Emma looked at him during the last presentation, the sparkle in her defiant eyes. That first moment of connection at the industry event had been haunting him ever since. He stood up, restless, and began pacing, pondering the possibility that there was something more between them, something that could be powerful, even if he didn't know how to deal with it. "If only I could understand what I feel for her," Daniel thought, remembering the way Emma had defended herself during the meeting. She was a force to be reckoned with, and that attracted him far more than he wanted to admit. The ambition that once consumed him now seemed small compared to the idea of sharing his life with someone who challenged him to be better. Meanwhile, in her own apartment, Emma was in a similar situation. She looked out the window, watching the movement of the streets below. Part of her wanted to forget Daniel, to focus only on her career and goals. But the other part, the one she tried to suppress, longed for those fleeting moments they shared. She sighed, frustrated. Why is it so hard? Why does he have to be so... Her mind hesitated, so irresistible. The memory of his lips close and the warmth of his body made her restless. The next day, in a strategy meeting, Emma decided she needed to resolve this situation. Looking at the table, where all eyes were fixed on her notes, she spoke firmly. We need to come together to overcome market threats. If we keep competing like this, we'll end up hurting ourselves more than helping. The words came out of her mouth as a declaration of intent, but the look she exchanged with Daniel made her heart race. He, who was sitting to her right, raised an eyebrow, surprised by the proposal. Do you really think that joining forces with your biggest rival is the solution? He smiled, a smile that mixed irony and curiosity. If it means we can win this crisis, yes, I think so, Emma replied, keeping her gaze steady. We need to put our differences aside and focus on what really matters. Daniel hesitated, his heart beating faster. And what does that mean for us? The question hung in the air, laden with meaning. Both knew that the line between rivalry and attraction was thin and dangerous. The atmosphere in the room changed. The other participants were silent, aware of the growing tension between the two. Emma felt vulnerable, but also empowered. It means we need to work together. This isn't about us, Daniel. It's about the future of our companies. As he pondered, Emma realized that the rivalry that once united them was now becoming an emotional battlefield. The idea of working together made her nervous, but at the same time excited. What if we do a joint presentation? We can combine our resources and ideas. What do you think? She hoped that the proposal would say more than words could express. Daniel, looking at her, saw not only the fierce competitor, but a woman who could be his partner in every sense. Let's do it, but know that it won't be easy, he replied, a challenging smile on his lips. I don't expect it to be, Emma replied, her tone lighter but her eyes still defiant. We're just getting started. As they prepared for the new phase of their careers, the shadow of an old rival of Daniel's began to loom on the horizon, threatening to destabilize them. This new threat would be a trial by fire for both, not only in business terms, but also in relation to what they were beginning to feel for each other. The tension between them became palpable, like a thread about to snap. What had started as rivalry was now becoming a dangerous dance between love, ambition, and the challenges that lay ahead. Emma was in her office, surrounded by papers and charts, but her mind was far from work. Daniel's words echoed in her head, along with the feeling of betrayal that consumed her. What should have been a partnership to face their common rival had turned into a tangle of distrust and hurt. She looked out the window, watching the city's movement below, trying to find clarity amid the emotional chaos. The last conversation she had with Daniel was still fresh in her memory. I never thought you would hide something from me, Daniel. Her voice had trembled, and she felt vulnerable, exposing her pain. He looked at her with a desperate expression, the words seeming trapped in his throat. What could he say that wouldn't hurt her even more? Daniel had always known he had a dark past, but he never imagined it could affect Emma. He took a deep breath before responding. Emma, I didn't want you to know. I thought I could resolve everything without involving you, but you need to understand that everything I did was for us. But the idea that he had kept a secret from her was tearing her apart. Distrust was growing like a shadow, and she couldn't help but wonder if he had really changed or if he was still the man she had always considered a rival. This isn't about us, Daniel. It's about you. I can't work with someone who isn't completely honest with me. He felt the weight of her words, as if a blade had cut through what was left of their connection. Emma turned away from him and the uncomfortable situation they had created. Daniel stood there, powerless, wishing he could do something to undo that conversation, but he knew that words weren't enough. In the days that followed, Emma focused on her work, diving into daily tasks as a way to escape the emotional pain. The vibrant city of Chicago had become a blur around her, and she felt like a stranger in her own life. Meetings, phone calls, presentations, everything seemed lifeless. What once was healthy competition had now become a battlefield filled with resentments. Meanwhile, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Emma. He knew he had to do something to regain her trust. The situation with the rival had brought them together in an unexpected way, but now with the rift, he felt lost. The growing pressure from his competition pushed him to act, but his priority was Emma. He found himself going through the information he had on the rival, determined to find a way to expose his frauds, and, in doing so, recover what they had lost. One night, as he reviewed documents in his apartment, his hands stopped on a report that seemed suspicious. Adrenaline rushed through his body as he realized there was something more there. Daniel read every word carefully, his mind racing with the implications. He had something he could use, not only for revenge, but to show Emma that he was worthy of her trust. The next day, he decided to act. With his heart pounding and determination high, Daniel gathered the evidence he found and prepared to act. He knew that the opportunity to redeem himself was within his reach, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. He needed Emma to see that, despite his mistakes, he was still the man she had known, and above all, cared about her. With a plan in mind, he headed to Emma's office. Upon entering, he felt the weight of the tension in the air. Emma was focused on her work, but the sight of her made him hesitate for a moment. He approached, his voice tense. "Emma, we need to talk. I have something that could change everything." She raised her head, surprised but still distrustful. "What is it about, Daniel?" He took a deep breath, determined not to let the opportunity slip away. "I discovered a fraud that our rival is committing. This could be the key to bringing him down, and more importantly, a chance to show you that I can be honest and worthy of your trust." Emma's eyes widened, curiosity and caution mixing in her gaze. She hesitated, but the possibility of turning the situation around made her interested. Daniel felt there might be a chance to regain what he had lost, but he needed Emma to be willing to listen. The rival company's boardroom was tense. Daniel, with the folder in hand, took a deep breath before addressing the group of executives who always considered him a threat. He knew that if he didn't do this now, he could lose the chance to not only win the corporate battle, but also regain Emma's trust. The atmosphere was charged with expectation. All eyes were on him. "Gentlemen, I would like to draw everyone's attention to a situation that cannot be ignored," Daniel began, his voice firm but with a touch of nervousness. "In recent months, a series of suspicious transactions have been recorded in your company, and I have concrete evidence that this is not just an accounting error." He opened the folder and began distributing copies of the documents he had gathered. "These documents show that your former colleague, Marco, was manipulating data to favor his own position. This is fraud." Murmurs began to spread through the room as Daniel continued. "Not only that, but these actions have put the integrity of the company and everyone who works here at risk. I believe that with this evidence, we can not only prevent this situation from worsening, but also restore investor confidence." Emma, who was sitting at the back, watched the scene with a racing heart. She couldn't take her eyes off Daniel. The determination he displayed made her reconsider everything she had thought about him. "Maybe I underestimated his ability to act with integrity," she thought, remembering how, even amid rivalry, he always cared about ethics. After the presentation, the board engaged in a heated discussion. Daniel stood in a corner, anxiously waiting for the verdict. Emma approached him, a mix of admiration and confusion in her eyes. "Daniel, I didn't know you had all this information," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I did what had to be done, Emma. Not just for us, but for everyone who works in that office," he replied, keeping his gaze steady. "And for you, always for you." She smiled slightly, realizing that despite all the rivalry, there was a bond between them that couldn't be ignored. "I thought you only cared about winning, that everything else was irrelevant," Emma said, her voice trembling a bit. "I used to think that until I realized that what really matters goes beyond business," Daniel replied, moving a little closer. "What I feel for you isn't something I can just ignore." The two looked at each other. The tension between them was palpable, like a thread about to snap. Emma felt her heart race, and the words she wanted to say hung in the air between them. "Daniel, I don't know if I'm ready to mix all this up again," she confessed, hesitant. "I'm not asking you to dive headfirst. I just want you to know that I'm here, willing to do whatever it takes for us to be more than just rivals," he said, extending his hand in a sincere gesture. The board meeting finally ended, and the decision was unanimous. Marco's company would be investigated, and the results of the fraud would be made public. Daniel and Emma met in a corridor, away from prying eyes. "Daniel," she began, "I realize that even amid all the rivalry, you always had the best intentions. I'm willing to give us a chance if you still want it." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "I've always wanted that, Emma. Let's face this together, both in business and in life." With a tacit agreement, they moved closer, and in a gesture that sealed the new phase of their lives, they embraced. The past seemed distant, and the ambition that once separated them was now transforming into a powerful alliance. While the old rival faced the consequences of his actions, Emma and Daniel were ready to rewrite their stories, no longer as competitors but as partners, determined to navigate the challenges of the business world and the love that had emerged between them. Now that we've explored how business rivalry can turn into an overwhelming passion, stop and reflect. How are you dealing with competition in your own life? Are you letting it consume you, or are you using it as fuel for meaningful growth? Are your strategies really helping you thrive, or are they just dragging you into an endless struggle? Ask yourself if there's a way to turn this pressure into a positive force that pushes you forward. Share your experiences in the comments and tell us how you're managing your rivalries. And click on the video that's appearing on your screen now. In my opinion, it's one of the best stories I've ever told. If you liked what you just heard, you'll undoubtedly love this other story too. So, subscribe to the channel, click on the video on your screen now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.